This week, I bought myself a new tool, but it's presented me with a problem. Because a sander like this generates a whole lot of dust, and we're talking fine, bad dust. And this is my current dust extractor, which has a few problems. First off, it doesn't have a filter on the top, so it doesn't stop fine dust. And I have heard that the amount of dust that a hobbyist woodworker inhales compared to a professional is an order of magnitude. So I want to not inhale any more of that dust. The second problem is how many machines I have to run off this. There's my table saw and my router table, my thicknesser and jointer, my bandsaw and my drum sander. Of course, there's all the smaller machines down here that would be great to get some decent dust collection on. And of course, the new belt sander. But this leaves me with one last problem. I don't have any space for a bigger dust collector. So out the back of my garage, I built myself a small shed. And inside the small shed, I've got enough room to put this nice big dust collector. It's got a cyclone and a HEPA filter, and it's outside, so less dust means a healthier workshop. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I ran all the ducting from the shed outside through to all these big machines. Let's get started. Now before getting started, I went and bought a bunch of 100mm drain pipe couplings. You can't see it, but I've got several lengths of it in the roof as well. And on top of that, I've gone and bought a bunch of lock-off valves, dust gates they call them. Now, when you're looking for these kind of things, I really encourage you to shop around. In my local big box store, they were about 3 or 4 times the price that I ended up purchasing them from. So make sure you look at your local plumbing store and all around before you buy them. Further to that, yes, you can get specialist dust collection piping, but that's probably double the cost of even the big box stores. So if you're on a budget, I encourage you to check out your local plumbing suppliers. So the first thing I need to do is run a pipe into the side of the garage, and unfortunately that's where I have a bunch of French cleat storage set up. So I had to begin with taking all of it down. And it was pretty gross behind that panel, but nothing a quick vacuum couldn't fix. So I've pulled down the French cleat wall so I can drill a hole through the wall into the shed out the back to get the ducting working. So now I've got to work out exactly how this is all going to fit together. Now, I want 2 pipes, one going this way to feed that side of the garage, and one going that way to feed that side of the garage. And these are the Y joins we use. Bearing in mind that I don't know what I'm doing here, my presumption is we don't want the vacuum to be sucking around any harsh corners. So what that means from a Y join perspective is we want the air to be flowing this way. We don't want the air to be having to flow around a corner. So if we're sucking from here, we don't want it to have to come through and around there. So that's going to dictate how I use these on the wall. But another thing it dictates is instead of getting a 90-degree join, I've opted to get many 45-degree joins to make a much easier 90-degree join. So you don't lose as much power as you're going around corners. I don't have any plans for exactly how I'm going to do this, so I'm going to sit down fiddling with these pipes here and work out what the best configuration is for me. So with a bit of playing around, I think I've worked out how I'm going to do it. I'm going to have this kind of snorkel going out the wall there, and you can see one pipe can run along the top, and then out the side here I'll put a joiner, and that'll go up and feed round that side of the wall. So from that I can work out pretty much where to drill my hole. I start off by using a hole punch to mark where I want to drill the hole, as this prevents the drill bit from dancing around on the metal. Then I drill a pilot hole that will match that of the pilot drill of the hole saw I'm going to use. And this is me pretending to drill the hole because I forgot to hit record when I actually did it. And because I didn't learn my lesson the first time, I also forgot to hit record when drilling the hole inside the shed, instead accidentally hitting record when I thought I was hitting stop. With the hole drilled through both the garage and the shed, I cut a small piece of pipe to run between the two. This is pretty easy to do on the drop saw, but make sure you take your time and hold your workpiece securely. I did have a blade catch once, and it was because I was in too much of a hurry. I could then slide the pipe through the holes into the shed and attach the snorkel thing I put together earlier. These pipes and fittings have a pretty good friction fit, so I'm choosing not to glue anything together, as this will make it way easier to adjust and reconfigure in the future. So I'm running out of bench space. I really need to get that French cleat wall back up. Obviously, there's a big pipe in the way of the French cleat wall now, so I put the backing board back in place to measure up where the pipe was in relation to the board. I could then cut out a slot in the backing board to account for the pipe, but I had to do this outside on the deck because there was no room left in the workshop. Then I could take the panel back into the workshop and screw it back in place. At this point, I probably should have started reassembling the French cleat wall, but I really wanted to get the first pipe up. So after measuring where I want the first drop to come down, I cut a length of pipe, slotted it into the snorkel and attached it with a single bracket. Before I move on, I needed to put this corner back together so I can actually have some space to pull everything else apart. And now we can move on to the other corner. As you can see in this corner, I've got another French cleat wall. I don't need to take this off because I don't need to drill a hole through it, but I do need to take the top cleat off to fit the pipe around. So let's get into that. It's times like these where a French cleat wall really shows its versatility, being able to rearrange without doing much. With the space cleared, I measured and cut the next length of pipe, and let me tell you, cutting this pipe makes a heck of a mess. I ended up vacuuming almost after every cut. It's a bit easier assembling the pipe on the workbench than while at the top of a ladder, so I added the two 45-degree angles for the corner and a bracket to hold the pipe in place. Then I could slot the pipe into the existing Y connector and screw the bracket in place. Then adding the rest of the piping was a matter of rinse and repeat, adding Y connectors where I wanted to drop down to a machine and always using two 45-degree joiners for any corners. And for the final drop, I could just use two 45-degree joiners, as I obviously didn't need to continue the pipe on any further. Now I could run all the drops to the individual machines, which was super simple. First up, I needed to attach a block of wood to the wall for mounting the blast gate on. Then all I needed was a piece of pipe, a 45-degree angle, and the blast gate itself. Again, I'm not gluing anything together here, but later on I did attach a small screw through the pipe into the blast gate to hold it in place a bit better. Finally, all I needed to do was connect the blast gates to each machine with a length of flexible dust pipe. And pretty soon I had 2 entire walls completely set up. Up until this point, setting up each machine has been pretty simple. It's just been plug in a pipe. But drop saws are notoriously bad for dust control. I've had a shop vac set up to this one for many years, and I may as well not have bothered. At the back is always a mountain of dust after even the smallest of projects. I've looked around for various solutions to this, and honestly, most of them are quite clunky. Some people build a big shroud over them, some people put some complicated thing in the middle here, and I didn't really want to build any of those. But when I was visiting a friend recently, they had an ingenious solution for this. You see, most of the dust ends up on the back behind it. So what they did is get one of these and recess it into the bench behind, and all the dust just falls in and is collected by your dust collector. So I'm going to do that now. After removing my drop saw from the bench, I used the dust chute to lay out where I wanted it to be, spacing it off the wall by 45mm or 2 inches. I then drew a new box inside the outline by about 15mm or half an inch, and this will be my cutting line. I'm going to cut this out with a jigsaw, and so to get started I drilled a few pilot holes to fit the jigsaw blade into. Now believe it or not, the next thing I did was to cut it out with the jigsaw. I cut proud of the lines as we're going to tidy this up in the next step. Now, as a self-respecting woodworker, I can't be leaving those rough jigsaw cut edges, so we're going to have to clean them up with a router and a flush trim bit. But I need a guide for the router bit to follow, so I stick a couple of scrap bits of wood down with some double-sided tape, following my guidelines I drew earlier, and then I'm good to go. So the one obvious problem with putting this behind my drop saw is it's a big hole and stuff's going to fall down it. Probably stuff I don't want to fall down it. So to deal with that, I'm going to put a mesh over the top. And I just so happen to have this bit of mesh gutter guard that I've probably had for about 10 years lying around, and I'm just going to staple that to the underside, and then I'm going to screw the chute in. There was really no way to get a good shot of this, but all I'm doing is stapling the mesh in place before putting the dust chute over the top and screwing it all into place. So with the dust chute in place, I needed to run some more pipe, which was just more of the same as before. But I was super keen to get the chute hooked up, so I decided to run the drop to it right away. So for the drop saw, again, I want to put a blast gate in there so I can cut it off when I'm not using it. But I want a 4-inch pipe going to the chute, but I also want another pipe going to where my shop vac used to be. Now, I had a problem where the connectors for these were sold out. And not only that, they were really expensive. And then I remembered I have a 3D printer. So I just printed one. And it fits perfectly and probably cost me $3. So if you're doing anything like this and you do have a 3D printer, do remember you can print your own fittings. I needed to cut a hole for the dust pipe to go through the top of the bench down to the dust chute underneath. So I used the same hole saw as before, but I discovered you need to be pretty careful here, as such a big hole saw can catch really easily and wrench your arm. so I learnt to brace my wrist to make sure I didn't break anything. With the hole made, I could drop some flexible dust hose through it and connect the hose to my wire connector and then on to the blast gate. I then added a small screw through into the blast gate to ensure it doesn't fall off. So the last piece of the puzzle is to connect the back of the drop saw here through into the dust collection system. And to do that, I've got an old piece of vacuum cleaner hose. But the problem I have is trying to find any sort of adapter to fit that to either of these ends. So again, I resorted to my 3D printer and I've printed a connector to go on this end and another connector on this end, and just plug it in and Bob's your uncle. The final drop is to my spindle sander, and at this point it was as easy as putting Lego together. I just slotted all the pipes together with a blast gate at the end and some flexible pipe to connect from the blast gate to the spindle sander. With everything all hooked up, it was time to test it out. But I was left with one big problem. When using the table saw, the switch for the dust collection was all the way on the other side of the shop. Now I could walk all the way over to the switch and turn it on, and then walk all the way back. But that felt a little pedestrian, and I'm sure I could do better than that. My first idea was a long piece of bamboo. And while it worked, it wasn't perfect, and if I'm honest, was maybe a little dangerous. Then I thought to myself, hey, I have 3 sons, maybe I can use them. So I tried the youngest first, but he was a bit too jumpy. So then I asked my middle child, but he was a bit too grumpy. Not wanting to give up, I tried my third son, and well, let's just say the outcome wasn't ideal, and it was obvious that I needed to explore other options that didn't include child labour. What I needed was something I could tell what to do that wouldn't talk back, and I think I've nailed it. Hey Google, turn on dust extractor. Hey Google, turn off dust extractor. Well, it's been a few months now since I put the new dust collection system in, so I've had a really good chance to put it through its paces, and I love it. Not only do I have it connected to all my major dust creating machines, but it's also easy to activate the dust collection on each machine. Before, I'd have to drag the machine around, and sometimes I just wouldn't do it, which would mean sawdust and dust and stuff everywhere. So this is a lot healthier for me, A lot easier to use, I'm stoked. So based on what I've done here, I've got a few tips that I'd offer you to make putting dust collection into your small shop cheaper and easier. The first tip is have a look at second-hand options first. You never know what you might find, and if you've got a small shop like mine, you don't need a brand new whiz-bang machine. The second tip is use drain pipe, 100 ml drain pipe. It's super cheap, way cheaper than all of the metal bits and pieces that you see everywhere. It's easy to cut and install. And again, if you've got a small shop, it just makes sense. And the third tip, if you've got it or have access to a 3D printer, that can help you immensely with some of those really tricky connection bits that you can't often find easily, or they're just really expensive. So have a look out there or hit up a friend if you can. Well, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.